All right, we're going to officially start now. All right. Because he lives.
Everybody hear me? Okay, here we go. Sitting on the side of the highway waiting to catch speed drivers, a state police officer sees a car puttering along at 22 miles an hour. He thinks to himself this driver is just as dangerous as a speeder, so he turns on his lights and pulls the driver over. Approaching the car, he noticed that there are five old ladies, 2 in the front seat and 3 in the back seat, eyes wide and white as ghosts. And the driver, obviously confused, said to him, "Officer, I don't understand. I was doing exactly the speed limit. What seems to be the problem?" "Ma'am," the officer replied, You weren't speeding, but you sure know that driving slower than the speed limit can also be dangerous to the other drivers. Slower than the speed limit, she said. No, sir, I was doing exactly the speed limit, exactly 22 miles an hour. The old woman said quite proudly. The state police officer, trying to contain his chuckle, explained to her that 22 was the route number, not the speed limit. A bit embarrassed, the woman grinned and thanked the officer for pointing out her error. But before I let you go, ma'am, I have to ask, is everyone in the car okay? These women seem to be awfully shaken, and they have murmured a single bit or said a single word the whole time. The officer asked, "Oh, that'll be all right in a minute, officer. We just got off Route 119. It reminds me of the time that my son was driving on Indian River Road, and there was a person in front of him that was going really, really slow. And he told my daughter-in-law, these people need to go somewhere else if they can't keep the speed limit. And as he passed them, it was his grandma and granddaddy. That's the absolute truth. Okay. Due to a power outage, the house was very dark. So the paramedic asked Kathleen, a 3-year-old girl, to hold a flashlight high over her mommy so he could see while he helped deliver the baby. The little Connor was born. The paramedic lifted him by his feet and spanked him on the bottom. He began to cry. The paramedic then asked the wide-eyed 3-year-old girl what she thought about what she had just witnessed. She quickly responded, "You shouldn't have crawled in there in the first place." Okay, that inspiration. Closed eyes. I'd like to tell you about a friend I met last year this time. He was a pretty special kid. You see, my friend is blind. That didn't stop him from playing his horn. He just listened once and knew it. He closed his eyes and fingered along. I'm not sure how he'll do it. I asked him why he closed his eyes. He answered quite profound. He said, people tend to stare at them, not focus on my sound. I thought for how true the world we have would we look before we listen. Maybe if we closed our eyes, the world would pay attention.
Thank you, Donna. You know, they say someone who is proficient in lots of things wears many hats. If you'd like to know how proficient Karen is at things, I entice you to go look at those banners over there and the many hats that she wears. It would have been great to see an astronaut one, because you got a cowboy, you've been to Mexico. Yeah. That's great.
No idea.
So great. Birthdays are fun. Some people don't like birthdays. I'm just someone who just, comes along. You get to do things with family or friends, and then everybody says, "What'd you do for your birthday?" I said, the same thing I do all the time. You just, I don't know. It's just something you want to do. Just enjoy people's presence. And for me, anyway. Some people like lavish parties. It's just another day sometimes, Well, we are in Matthew 8. We graduated. And real quick, I just want to say the last verses there in Matthew 7. So after he finishes doing the whole, we call the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, and after Jesus has spoken everything, it says, "And it happened when Jesus finished these words, and the crowds were astonished at the teaching he gave, for he was teaching as that one having authority and not like the scribes." So remember, when Jesus does things and says things, he's coming from a point of authority, not just because he knows them. Why does Jesus come from a point of authority about all of these things?
Because God gave him that title.
He's the son of God.
Told him he was.
So what does that mean?
He's part of the Trinity. He is God. He is part of the Trinity.
Okay, So if he knows about them, what else can he, because lots of people know about the things they're talking about, why does he speak as one having authority over the things he talks about?
Because he's the creator. Part of it.
So he
wrote it.
wrote it.
He wrote it down.
He wrote it. He set it in motion. So when he talks about the law, he doesn't talk about the law like a law student. He talks about the law like a legislature, as someone who specifically wrote it for a specific reason to do a specific thing. And he takes what people have interpreted over so many thousands of years and he says, stop. This is what it really means. This is getting to the heart of the matter. It just doesn't mean this. It means this. And this is where it comes from. And people were pretty astonished at that time because they weren't used to hearing things that were so true. They weren't used to hearing things that were unexcusable. A lot of times when we look at things in our life, even in church, when it comes to things that we ought to be doing, we kind of have these excuses of, oh, it's this, or this is what we do, or we practice this. And it's just a big excuse for not doing something that's in Scripture or to make it lighter. It's not. It's not lighter. It's not easy. It's very difficult. It's hard. And we have to remember to look at things from God's point of view and not from our simpleton, childlike mindset of how we see things that are so profound and so grand. You know? It's easy to look at the sun and say, well, the sun is yellow, but that's our perspective. It's different when you're looking at it from space. And it's a different color. It has a different hue. It does different things. So remember, every time we read this and we process these things that happen, they're always from our point of view. And remember that God wants you to not just look at them from your point of view. He does want you to see them from your point of view, but he wants you to understand them and process them from his perspective and how he sees it. Okay? So going forward into chapter 8, if I could have someone read from verse 1 through verse 4.
Jesus came down from the mountainside. Large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them.
So we have a lot of interaction happening here. Who are our main protagonists? What individuals are we working with?
Jesus
Jesus,
was the man with leprosy.
the man with leprosy. Anytime it says leprosy in Scripture, don't think it means specifically leprosy, what we would call scientifically leprosy. Again, they don't have science back then. Leprosy was a various amount of different skin diseases. Does anyone know what those skin diseases prevented someone who has them from doing?
Or worshiping.
Mingling, interacting.
Interacting,
Worshiping in the temple.
going to the temple. You're limited when you have these things, and women specifically on their monthly time. You can't go and worship God because you're flawed. How are you flawed? You're unclean how?
Physically.
Physically. So God, during this whole time, is working with the people at a physical level. The law, if you ever read the law, there's a lot of spiritual stuff in there, but it has to do with what you're doing or what's happening physically. So God is establishing the physical covenant that starts with what physical thing? The covenant started with Abraham with what physical thing? Circumcision. So God establishes that covenant with the first physical thing, circumcision. Then he moves into the law. Then there's all these keeping clean physically kind of things. Okay? This is physical covenant. This guy can't go worship, can't present a gift, can't be at the temple. In fact, most likely he would have had to walk around with his face covered, saying unclean, because he's not ritualistically, physically clean. So we have these two fellows, Jesus, this guy. Why does this man go to Jesus? On the simplest answer. He knew Jesus could heal him. So he goes to Jesus. How does he know that Jesus can heal him? Faith. as we know, seen Jesus heal anybody? No. At this point in Matthew, has Jesus healed anybody?
Probably not.
No, not in Matthew. There are other places in Luke where it talks about him doing this beforehand. So he most likely got word that Jesus could do these things. But in not seeing them, there's no TV, there's no radio, he merely hears this, so then he goes to the guy that can accomplish the thing that he wants done. So what does Jesus say to him when he comes to him and says what he says? What does Jesus say? What's his response?
I am willing.
I am willing. Why does he say I am willing?
He asked him if he was willing.
Why does he ask that question? Why does he say the words, if you're willing? He knows he can do it if,
Person believes.
well, more than that. He's willing to do it if,
There's faith from the other party.
not just faith, but why does he say if you will? Where is he putting the emphasis?
Action.
On whose action? Jesus, the healer. You go to a doctor, and you tell the doctor, hey, doctor, I have a broken arm. I know that you're a specialist, and you can fix my broken arm. I have nothing to give you in terms of payment. Please fix my broken arm if you're willing to do it. You have taken all the impetus away from your faith. You've taken the impetus away from yourself. You've taken all the action away from you, and you have put everything onto the healer. You have said, if you are willing to do these things, please do for me. You're not just begging. I think a lot of times as Christians, we go and just beg and beg and beg. But we forget the very thing that Jesus says when he's in his most dire moment. But not my will, yours. When we think about healing and people who are hurt, I have tendonitis right now in my left elbow. It hurts quite a bit. It's a lot. Holding a pillow, even sometimes picking things up, just doing this hurts. When I pray, it can often be, take this away, take this away, take this away, take this away. Yet I'm missing a very important part. I have nothing to offer on the other side of that contract. I have nothing to give in negotiation. So that offer should include it's up to you. You do your will. You do as you see fit. As Paul prays 3 times, take this away, take this away. But again, this isn't my will. You do your will. And what's God's will in that situation? He says to Paul what?
My faith.
Your grace.
Is sufficient.
Your grace, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. This means I have to realize I'm human. I can't go throw shoes around like I did a couple weeks ago. I can't just grab a giant box like this with one hand. Oh, that hurts. And then do it like this. I can't do it. I have to rely more on something else. I can't just chuck a big box. I have to say, hey, Ty, can you move that thing for me so I can do this? And he does it. I have to rely on someone else. This fella here doesn't rely on himself. He goes and he gives everything over to Jesus. Your will. You do as you see fit, Father. And Jesus' response is, I'm willing. Why do we not think of Jesus more in those terms? In the terms of just saying, what is your will? What is your will for my life? A lot of times we ask and ask and ask, but like James says, you ask and you're not given because you want to spend it on your pleasures. I'd love to have more money, but I'd buy a lot more action figures. How does that further God's kingdom when I get a brand new Superman and I go, oh, that looks so cool? That doesn't further God's kingdom. We have to remember those things. It has to be within God's will, and we need to ask in that way. So immediately he's cleansed. And then Jesus gives him instruction after he's clean. What does Jesus say?
Go tell the priest.
Don't tell him.
Before that,
Don't tell him.
why?
I was going to ask you that. Why?
I'll came to see Jesus on the mountain? Okay. As he came off the mountain, how many people were there? Crowds, just says crowds, crowds and crowds. If this fella talks about a healing, what's Jesus going to get?
Bum rush.
More crowds. Lots more crowds. What is Jesus also going to get? Reputation. What kind of reputation? Not just for healing, but if someone famous, Brad Pitt, okay, comes in church, and Brad Pitt comes into church and sits down, what happens?
Nobody pays attention to the preacher, they pay attention to Brad Pitt.
So what becomes then the purpose of everyone coming in?
To see him.
To see Brad Pitt. Why does Jesus heal this man?
I got you. I got you.
No. Why does it heal him?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of Jesus' healing? Not the his purpose. If it were for Jesus' own glory, what would he have said to him? Tell everybody. Why does Jesus heal him? He reveals it in the next verse. Right after that. Why is he healing?
Oh, for the priest.
Not just the priests, but for what? Go give what?
Testimony.
No, go give your what?
Gift.
Gift. Why is he giving a gift? Why is because say it louder. Someone said it, Moses.
The gift that Moses commanded.
The gift that Moses commanded. He can't do the thing that he's supposed to do under the law because he has a skin condition.
And now he can.
Now, because Jesus has healed him, this man can then do what? Give his gift in obedience. This man can't obey God because his skin condition prevents him from doing the thing that he is supposed to do within the law. And he comes to Jesus, I imagine maybe selfishly saying, I have the skin condition, I'd like it healed, but more than that, if you're willing to do this, Jesus, knowing all these things in probably his heart, says, I got you. I heal you. Now, I want you to not bring fame on you or myself. You're going to go do the thing that is commanded of you in the law of Moses. Bring your gift, you've been healed, and in addition, it serves as a testimony. In addition, the gift and you obeying God is the real purpose. Like I said about money, how many times when we ask for a thing, do we ask for the thing to glorify God and do his obedience? How many times? Or is it just, I want this gone because it just allows me to work better? Would it not be better if I had a kidney disease, that while I'm suffering my kidney disease, glorify God in this kidney disease, instead of just wanting to be healed for my own purposes of not having it? Instead saying, God, I want you to guide me through this thing. I need you. What is your willingness? And God, in my older brother's testimony, uses that very thing that he was sick with for so long as a testimony of God's power in his life. Not because he was healed miraculously, but because his strength was sufficient for my brother in his weakness. We forget that God is not about us. God is about God and made us to be about God. When God does his will, a lot of times it benefits us, but it's not for us. God doesn't use prophets so that they benefit, so that they profit. He uses prophets to benefit him and probably other people. Jesus suffers. He has to go through these terrible things. But it's done not for Jesus, it's done for God and his glory. Every time you see these healings, every time you see something special, it's never to point to the person getting it or the person doing. It's always supposed to point and serve the purpose of God's mission. So, when you do those prayers for healing, for someone coming to the faith, for a change in the nation, for a change in the world, people's hearts. What is your motivation? That is to be the question you ask yourself. Why am I praying this prayer? Why am I making this request? And if at the root of it, the only thing you can think of is because, well, I would like that to happen. Do you think he's going to give it to you? Probably not. A lot of times we want people saved so that, not that they won't have to suffer forever, but that they change their attitude for something that we want. A lot of times when we say, I wish that they would believe. Why? Well, so that they could think the same way that I do. I wish they would change their heart. Well, so that we wouldn't fight so much. I mean, Paul and Barnabas and Timothy, these guys fought. They fought about what to do and where to go. But they did it as brothers. Doesn't mean they always had like-mindedness. It happened that there would become a fight between them, a prickliness, as the Greek says, a sticking, like spurs on a horse. And it kind of made a move. We have to remember that.
But that had a purpose too.
That had a purpose. God's words get spread in different areas, not just one. Just remember, everything is about pointing to God and not just pointing to ourselves. Anyone have anything else about that?
Isn't it true though, God, in his mercy, Jesus has pity on people and chooses to heal them? I mean, not because it's the part of his ministry, but just because he has pity on them and he loves them.
Wrong word. Compassion. Pity is often, you're up here looking down. That's pity. I think of pity as like a rope that you're throwing down and saying, oh, here's the least I can do. Compassion, the Greek word that has compassion that's used, especially in Matthew, is the word of the turning of the gut. Okay? Their idea of the word heart, we think of heart here, it's like the center of their being. That's where Eastern mythologies get their ideas, the center of your being. His center being is feeling towards them, that compassion. It's not so much this is the thing I'm doing for you. It's more of I feel an intense need to do something good. It doesn't matter the direction, because Jesus is still human. So he gets those moments of compassion. But again, a lot of times, we're going to see one specifically coming up here. But specifically, he typically will use those as a form of teaching, but sometimes he just, like you said, does it to do it.
Just does it to do it.
He'll do it
because he loves us.
Right. Because he loves us, but because at that time he was human. Remember,
I mean, he hasn't changed. He's the same yesterday, today, forever.
if Mary, after Christ had gone to heaven, would Jesus obey Mary the same way he did when he was on earth? No. Why?
Because now he's God and not her son.
Right. When he was on earth, would he obey what all of the priests told him to do? Yes. Would he obey what the scribes and the Pharisees and Sadducees who sat in the seat of Moses did? Would he obey them?
Not always.
When wouldn't he obey them?
What?
When wouldn't he obey them?
When they were saying something wrong that was contrary to what he's teaching.
They weren't interpreting the law.
When something was incorrect.
Yeah.
We have to remember, that's where we get mixed up. When Jesus was on earth, he was human. In his inner being, his soul is still God. Ours is not. Our soul is not God. It is not made up of God stuff. Okay, it's made up of whatever he makes our spirits to be. His inner being is God stuff. But yet, because he's in, as it says in Philippians, he's wrapped in this earthly flesh, he still has to do the things that we do. He eats. Do you think God eats right now? He doesn't need to eat. Does he drink? Do you think he uses a latrine? No. Did he then? He was put under the compelling of his flesh. He had to do those things because he was human. So when his mom says to him, stop talking, he'd stop talking. If she says, I want you to do this thing, he'd do it. In fact, I used this example a couple nights ago. The very thing that he's come to do is to seek the lost, right? He's to bring the lost of Israel, not the Gentiles, but to bring the lost of Israel in. And yet, his mother says to him, hey, Jesus, we need a thing done. And Jesus says, what? What's his response to her?
Not my time.
Not my time. He says truth. It's not my time. What does Mary then say to him after that?
Do whatever he says.
Did she speak to Jesus?
She gave him a look.
Jesus obeys his mom. He doesn't respond by saying, yes, Mom. He says, my time has not yet come. I can imagine him saying, Mom, no, this is not right. And then she pats him on the head and says, do what he tells you to do. And then Jesus now knows that he is compelled to follow his mother's instructions, even though he has explicitly stated that this is not the time for it. He still obeys his mother because he's on earth and she is his authority. Jesus, likewise, when he has to go to the bathroom, that is an authority over him at that moment. He goes and does it. Many passages have Jesus going and being alone because he can't take the constant crowds all the time. Nobody can, not even Brad Pitt. People can't take it. When he's on earth, he's just like you and me. We forget that so many times. He is under the same law as you and me. Okay? When he's in heaven, he is not bound by that Mosaic law. He is not bound by it because he is it. When he comes to earth, he has to obey every single thing it does. Every single thing it says. The Romans, he has to obey everything that they say and everything that they compel him to do. Because he was human. And we forget that. I don't ever want you to forget that. Why does Jesus do this in this moment? He's human. He's still human and still God, but he is still under different authorities that he wouldn't be if he's in heaven. Just remember that in all these interactions. I want you to really remember that, okay? I'm just thinking of an interesting, it's an interesting duality though, if you think of it that way. That he's under this compelling when he's human, and yet still in his spirit he's free. And I think of ourselves, aren't we still under the compelling of the human flesh? While we're here, but we're free in the spirit to do the good things. Against these things there is no law. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And living by that spirit, and Jesus lives by that spirit while still being wrapped in that flesh.
Russell,
Yes.
when he was telling the leper that do not tell anybody else what I have done, don't you think it's an understanding Jesus has that if this leper goes out and tells everybody knows, all the people with leprosy are going to load up at Jesus' doorstep. Everybody who has a limp is going to come to Jesus, and they're really going to miss so much of why he's there
That's
to teach them.
right, that's the point.
Yeah.
Right.
That he can't be overloaded with healing because he's there to teach. He's there to serve the Heavenly Father.
The other example I think of when you say is the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. They come to him and say, these people need food. And what's Jesus' response? Feed them. No, not his first response.
Tell them to sit down.
Oh, you could send people out to go buy food. Send people out to go buy food. That's Jesus' first response. They can go buy their food. They're not here for this. I'm not here to give them earthly food. That's not why I came. I gave them for spiritual food. Why are you asking me for this? And then they're like, but really, there's so many people here, and they don't have enough money to go do that. They're probably from this city way over there. The exchange rate's different. They might use different currency. Remember, this is a very primitive time compared to how we think about it. You know? So he says, okay, get me what you can. And then they have the boy. And again, Jesus is always focused on his ministry no matter what. That's his main focus. The other things that he does that benefit people, he's not just sitting there doing these things to benefit people. He's doing them to point towards God. That's exactly why he came, to fulfill those prophecies, fulfill that ministry, as we're going to see here. Can I have someone read from 5 through 13?
Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. And Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
One thing I took from this was the centurion to have absolute total faith in the fact that Jesus could do it, where the leper, he said, if it be your will, which to me showed a little bit of, maybe doubt. Did I have the same faith? And this is a Roman soldier. This guy over here was an Israelite, Jewish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And Jesus said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. And his servant was healed that same hour.
Okay. Why, again, same question, why does this centurion, in Luke it gives us a better context. Would Jesus talk to a centurion?
Probably not.
Probably not. In Luke it gives the context of the centurion asks the elders, the Jewish elders, please go speak to Jesus on my behalf. And then they go to Jesus and they go through this conversation, and then Jesus is on his way to the house, and when the centurion hears that Jesus is on the way, he's like, no. He sends his friends to go and say, plead with him. No. You don't have to come into my dirty, filthy Gentile house. You can just say the word and it's done, okay? Again, he's showing compassion on someone who is not most likely a Jew that would be a servant in the Roman household, but he probably could be. They did take people that were Jews into their houses as servants and slaves and so on. But here, what is Jesus' first response? What's the first thing he says when he's requested to heal?
Come and heal.
Go.
I'll go and I'll heal him, okay? I'll go and heal. So it's a natural, okay, you want a healing, I'm going to go and heal. Again, this centurion is someone who's a little more prominent than a regular person, and we might say, why is he showing deference to him? But still, there's still an honor code system, again, that Jesus is under because he's still human. He's going to show deference to the children of Israel. And then in this situation, it's a Roman saying, hey, do this thing. Remember, he's still under Roman law as a human being. So he's like, all right, I'll do this thing. But then what is the response from the centurion side to the I'll go and heal him?
You don't have to come. I know it'll be done if you say so.
And what reasoning does he give for this?
Authority.
What kind of authority?
I guess a chain of authority. If I tell people to do things and they respect my authority, he respects Jesus' authority.
He respects Jesus' authority. Does this man, like I've said, have authority over Christ?
No. Oh,
As a
yeah,
human,
yeah.
As a human, yeah, absolutely.
Not
They
with
put him
Christ
to
per
death.
se, but as a Roman citizen.
Right. So he has authority as a Roman over Jesus as a Jew living in Judea under a Roman occupation. But yet, Jesus sees this as a faith situation and says, oh, I'll go and do the thing you've commanded. And then his response is, oh, no. You don't have to do that because just like in my household, I tell someone to do a thing, they do it. Why do they do it? Because he's authority. And what do you do under authority?
I like what the commentary says here.
Do you obey every authority? Why not? Why don't you obey authority, Gaynell? Why don't you're shaking your head? No, I don't obey authority. Why not?
Because a lot of times they're wrong.
Says who?
That's me.
So, if that Roman centurion servant didn't do as he had told him, what would happen to him?
His head cut off.
Probably get be dismembered. Yeah, all sorts of terrible. Probably most likely be lashed.
Yeah.
And then after a lashing, is he going to disobey again? Probably not.
We do have to,
Right.
we do have to respect our authority figures.
So what does that mean in our context? Here's Jesus responding to Roman authority. What's that mean in our context?
Well, I
should
think
obey
it
all
means we're
governing
supposed to
authority.
respect our authority.
Say that again, Joe.
We should obey all governing authority.
Right.
We should obey all governing authorities. So if we don't like a rule, what does that mean for us?
Too bad, you gotta.
Too bad! And why do we obey that rule? The ultimate, penultimate reason. The beginning. Why do we obey that rule?
So we don't get hurt.
That's the first reason. Keep building. It goes higher.
Because
Well, there's
God
a reason.
says we're supposed to.
Because God told us to obey him.
Okay, because God told us to, now go a step higher. Why did God tell us to obey that authority? Go higher.
Because he's over them.
Because he's over them, but what did he also do? If he's over them, then he must have,
appointed them.
he
Authority.
appointed them. Did God, and I don't want to get political, but did God appoint Joe Biden?
I hope.
Specifically? No. Did God appoint that we have a governing authority over our nation?
Yes.
Yes. If they make a law,
Romans 13, 1 and 2.
say it.
Let all souls be subject to governing authority. For there is no authority that exists except from God. And an authority that exists is appointed by God. Therefore, if you disobey, you bring judgment unto yourself.
It's the same thing Peter says. These people were under a totalitarian authority state that dictated that they do all these mundane and ridiculous things, and it allowed them to worship at the temple. It allowed them to continue their sacrifices. It could have removed them. In fact, it does. About 40 years after Jesus dies in 70 AD, it totally says, nope, we're done with you guys. You're old. So, these people, in that time, under that authority, are told by Paul and by Peter, and even Jesus' response here, to obey their authority. So when we, as Christians, say, no, is that right or wrong?
Only if they're telling you
It's
something contrary.
wrong.
to-
I was gonna say, if it's
That's
contrary to
different.
God's
Yeah,
word,
contrary.
yeah.
That's different.
Right.
If they come into your house and they say, you can't go to church,
Then you
You
don't.
say, let me suffer.
sometimes it means you go to prison. We had a time during COVID where I watched a lot of churches just kind of go, well, we'll go to viewing things online.
Right?
I'm sorry, but we are called to gather together. And if that means every one of us is arrested, then we get arrested. And yet so many Christians said, okay, I'll stay home. I'll watch online. And now what do we have? I'm not talking to you people there. I appreciate you viewing my face. Yeah, sorry. And thank you for that. I don't even like looking in the mirror. But we gave a thing up. And then as time goes on, 4 years thence, we're in a period of time when people will just say, oh, I can watch online. And we miss the point of the church. If the state says you wear a mask when you go in public, then you wear a mask. If the state says you can't pray in public, then you can pray in public. You see, there's a difference here between things that are spiritual and things that are fleshly. If they say you have to wear button-down shirts in public, then you wear button-down shirts in public. If they say that you can't talk about Jesus on the street corner or you get put in prison, then what? You do it and you talk about Jesus because that's what God commanded you to do. He commands you to follow authority, but the limit stops when it hits the commands of God. It stops. I am not supposed to talk about Jesus at work. I can't walk up to someone and say, hey, are you saved? Do you know Jesus? I could get in trouble. And yet, when I talk to people, well, what did you used to do? Well, I was a preacher and I teach a class now. Oh, really? You have a church? Yeah. Well, I disagree with that. I'm an atheist or something. Oh, what has happened? Naturally, the conversation has gone in a direction that I didn't start. If someone says, Russell, you can't talk to people like that, I say, you know, those people would be the ones who have to say something. And they don't, because they're the ones talking about it. I don't get in trouble because I'm using their little thing to work around.
Right.
They open the conversation, I'm going to walk right through that door, bust that sucker open, say, here we go, Jesus time.
There you go.
If people don't like it, they change the subject. Sometimes I don't pick up on cues. That's unfortunate. I try to pick up on things, and then we change subject, but that's not typical. That's not typical.
Because your walk and your talk takes you there.
We have to remember that we fight so hard to change what the culture, what the governing forces do. We thankfully actually have a way to do that. We get to vote. Okay, we get to vote people in office, and then we say, oh, whether or not they did, we want or not. And you get to speak in public, and we get to protest and all these things. But as Christians, we have to remember that we should be the example of an obedience, because if Jesus obeyed their authority of a tyrannical government that ultimately hated what he stood for, then we too say that this was founded by him and his power, then how much more are we called to obey that? Even in the insignificant things. But not when it comes into conflict with the message and the word and the teaching of God. But we pick the wrong battles. I had to get in people's faces, Christians, about the stupid mask thing. If it's a commercial building and that's what it says, you're a good Christian and you do it. So many people walking, I ain't doing it, I'm a Christian, I don't follow your stuff. Really? That's a horrible example to unbelievers. A horrible example. But if you do that, and the Christian brother says, why are you doing that? Because, you know, if putting on a mask inconveniences me, then I'll inconvenience and show that I can follow the regulations everybody else does.
Let me, if you would allow me, everything about what you're talking about. This commentary really, it says, Jesus told the crowd that many religious Jews who should be in the kingdom would be excluded because of their lack of faith, entrenched in their religious traditions, which you're talking about. They could not accept Christ and his new message. We must be careful not to become so set in our religious habits that we expect God to work only in specific ways. God was so impressed with this centurion, you know, yet he said, yet this man's genuine faith amazed Jesus. This hated Gentile faith put to shame the stagnant piety of many of the Jewish religious leaders.
I heard a great joke. And this was, I thought it was hilarious. So this guy says, my pastor kicked me out of my church. Why did your pastor kick you out of your church? Well, it's interesting because when I had no money to pay my bills, I went and told my pastor, and he put his hands on me and he prayed with me, oh, Father, please bless this man, let him have the income to pay his bills. And he looked at me and he shook me by the shoulders and right in my eyes said, God bless you, son. Prayers and things are coming your way, you'll be blessed. And I had to scrounge and scrape to get the money together to pay my bills. And then I was at the store and there was my pastor. And my pastor said, I don't have enough money to buy groceries. And he says, I went up to my pastor and I put my hands on his shoulders. And I said, oh, Lord, help this man buy his groceries. And I patted him on the back and said, God will bless you, have a good day. Kick me out of the church.
And the Bible says, if a brother or sister be naked of daily food, and one of you say to him, go ye in peace, be ye warm and filled. I will pray for that. That ain't doing it. Faith without works is dead, right?
Right.
Where are we stopping at, Russell?
We're going to end right there at the mother-in-law at the 13.
13?
Well, yeah. So again, remember, there's points of faith that we get wrapped up in that have nothing to do with anything else. Okay? We think that things are for our benefit. We think that things are always supposed to point towards us. You know, I don't care. The government at some point is going to say, put pictures of whoever. They did it in Germany. They can do it anywhere. Put pictures of whoever in there. You have to make sure that you have bylaws. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. What? You have to make sure you obey those bylaws. That sounds familiar. You can't be open during these times. You can't do these things. And in some states I've heard you can't say certain things, you can't broach certain topics, you can't preach this, or possibly you could have your, 501c, your tax exemption taken away from you. You know what, I'm sorry.
I don't think that's ever happened.
Oh, in Texas, churches were being told by their mayors
They lost.
that they had to submit until they decided to vote the guy
I
out.
don't mean that that kind of thing didn't happen, but
Right.
they take away their 501c, whatever it's called.
You think it won't though?
No, it didn't.
No, it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
But that's something, I look at the way things go, I hold no faith for it. I hold no faith. It's going to get to a point where we're going to be just like China, just like Russia in the 80s, where we're underground, where we're meeting and the potential for us to be arrested is going to happen. And a lot of times we say, oh, that can't happen in this place. Nobody believes it can happen in that place until it does. Until it does. The point is, you focus on your faith and what God has you to do, and get over all the stuff that we think is so important to us, and just do His will just as He did. Remember, we follow His example. And in His example, sometimes we have to do things that we don't like, but in doing so, we don't point to us, we point to Him and who He is. Does anyone else have anything about that?
Yes, now that Karen is wearing the crown of authority, we must all bow down to her and obey.
No, no.
Russell, I just want to say that we're having this conversation right now with our middle school about that you need to be a Christian first at school. You need to act like a Christian, because people that are not Christian, that's the first thing they say. When they find out somebody's a Christian, they will say, you don't act like a Christian. So it's very important that we act like one when we're out and about.
I got picked on in 3rd grade for it. It happened. That's the only time I think I've ever been punched, was in 3rd grade. I don't know, I think I was talking about Jesus. I think I'd either just been saved, no, it'd probably been a couple years. I just was talking to this kid about it. And for some reason, he just punches me. And I started quoting scripture at like 9 years old or something. And I just remember being pushed and punched, and then he eventually just walked away. And it's like, and I always think about that and said, I've never done that as an adult. I've never really gotten that situation. Maybe it's because, adults are different than kids for the most part in my home. But yeah, it's, if you show that example, sometimes it's going to go the opposite way. You're going to get picked on because you don't show Jesus. Sometimes you get picked on because you do show Jesus. So